He was not supposed to be on the 14th floor. The 14th floor of the Mirae Tower was reserved for mid-level administrative offices, the kind of departments that kept a corporation breathing without ever appearing in its press releases. Accounts payable, document management, internal compliance review. The 14th floor smelled of printer toner and the particular staleness of air that circulates through spaces where people work very hard and are noticed very little. Shin Jae-won had not been on the 14th floor in 4 years. He had not needed to be. He was the chairman of Mirae Group, 42 years old, and his world existed on floors 38 through 40 of this building, the executive suites, the boardroom, the private dining room with the glass wall that looked out over the Han River like a statement. He was on the 14th floor tonight because the elevator had stopped here, doors opening without his instruction, responding to some maintenance override that his PA would hear about in the morning. He had been in the middle of reading a document on his phone. He had stepped out before realizing it was the wrong floor, and the doors had closed behind him, and the elevator had descended without him. It was 11:40 at night. The 14th floor was empty. Almost empty. The light was on in the third office from the end of the corridor, the one with the frosted glass panel that said, in small black lettering, Document Control, Senior Review. The door was slightly open. He could hear nothing from inside, which was not what stopped him. What stopped him was what he saw through the frosted glass. A woman, sitting at a desk covered in stacked folders and printed documents, her head bent forward, one hand pressed flat against the desk surface, and the other covering her mouth. She was not making a sound. She was crying in the specific, disciplined way of someone who has learned to cry without being heard, the kind of silent, contained grief that costs more than the loud kind because it requires you to hold the weight of it entirely alone. Jae-won stood in the corridor and looked at this for approximately 3 seconds. He was a man who had trained himself, over a career built on decisive action, to assess situations quickly and act without hesitation. This instinct served him in boardrooms and negotiations, and the rapid response crises that came with running a company of this size. It served him now in the opposite direction. He stood completely still and did not act at all, because the situation in front of him was not one that responded to decisive action, and he knew it. He should have walked past, called the elevator, gone back to his floor. He knocked on the open door instead. Her name was Adaora Eze, and she was 31 years old, and she had been with Mirae Group's document control department for 2 years, which was not long enough for anyone on the upper floors to know her name, but was long enough for her to know exactly what was wrong with the quarterly compliance filing that she had been reviewing since 7 that evening. What was wrong with it was serious. What was wrong with it was the kind of serious that had a name, not the bureaucratic name, the legal name, and she had spent 4 hours confirming that she was right, going back through the original documents 3 times, checking the cross-references because she was the kind of person who did not raise a concern until she was absolutely certain. She was absolutely certain. And she had been sitting with that certainty for approximately 20 minutes, trying to decide what to do with it, when the door knocked, and she looked up and found a man she had never seen in person standing in her doorway. She had, of course, seen his face. It was on the company intranet homepage. It was in the framed photographs in the lobby. It was in the business press regularly enough that she had, when she first took the job, looked at it and thought, that is the face of a man who has never been uncertain about anything. She had been wrong about that, she would later learn. But she did not know it yet. She straightened. She pressed the back of her hand against her face with the efficiency of someone removing evidence. "Chairman Shin," she said. Her voice was completely steady, which was an act of considerable discipline. He looked at her from the doorway. He was in his suit. He was always in his suit, apparently, even at midnight, and he had the qualities she had seen in the photographs: contained, directed, assessing. But there was something else in his expression now that had not been in the photographs. Something she could not immediately name. "I took the wrong floor," he said. "The elevator." He did not leave. She waited. "Are you all right?" he said. The question landed in the room with the weight of something unexpected. Not the question itself, it was a simple question. The weight was in the fact that he had asked it, that he had knocked instead of walking past, that he was standing in the doorway of a 14th floor document control office at midnight asking the senior review officer if she was all right. "Yes," she said. "Thank you. I apologize. I didn't realize anyone was still in the building." The building is always occupied, he said. I'm usually on 38th. He paused. What are you reviewing? She looked at him. At the stack of folders on her desk. At the document open in front of her with 3 different colored sticky notes marking the pages she had returned to most. She made a decision. The Q3 compliance filing, she said. I found something I need to report. I've been trying to determine the correct channel. He was quiet for a moment. What did you find? I'd rather not say until I've confirmed the protocol. I don't want to, she stopped. Started again. I want to make sure I do this correctly. He looked at her for a long moment, the full, assessing attention of a man used to reading situations. What's your name? He said. Adaora Eze. Senior Document Reviewer, 14th floor. How long have you been with Mirae? 2 years. And you've been here since when tonight? 7. He looked at the stack of folders. At the 3 colors of sticky notes. At the cold cup of tea, at the edge of the desk. I'll wait, he said, and came into the office, moved a stack of folders from the chair on the other side of her desk, and sat down. She stared at him. Chairman Shin. You said you need to confirm the protocol before you report it. The correct protocol for a compliance concern of this nature is to bring it directly to the chairman. He looked at her steadily. I'm here. Take as long as you need. If you just found this channel, subscribe now. Do not leave. Because in the next 20 minutes this woman is going to do something that takes more courage than anything this building has seen in years. And this man is going to discover that the 14th floor contains something the 38th never had. Stay. She told him. Not immediately. First, she reorganized the documents into the sequence that made the problem clearest, which took 7 minutes, and he watched her do this without speaking, without impatience, with a quality of attention she would later identify as one of the 2 things she had not expected from him. The other thing she had not expected would come later. The compliance issue was this. A series of vendor contracts in the infrastructure division, signed over an 18-month period, showed a pattern of fee structures that had been approved through an internal channel that should have required external audit sign-off. The sign-off had been bypassed, not fraudulently, she was careful to say, not with obvious intent, but systematically, in a way that suggested either a process failure or a deliberate workaround by someone who understood the approval architecture well enough to navigate around it. The financial exposure was significant. The reputational exposure, if it surfaced externally before being addressed internally, was more significant. She laid it out with the precision of someone who has spent 4 hours making sure every sentence is defensible. She showed him the documents in the order she had found them. She showed him the cross-references. She showed him, without editorializing, the specific approvals that should have existed and did not. When she finished, the office was quiet. He had not interrupted once. He had not taken notes. He didn't need to, she sensed. He was the kind of person who retained everything. How certain are you? He said. Completely. You checked 3 times. The sticky notes are the 3rd pass. Blue is the first, red is the 2nd, yellow is where I still had questions. There are no yellow notes left. He looked at the documents. He looked at her. Who else has seen this? No one. I was the assigned reviewer for this quarter's filing. The concern came up in my review. I haven't spoken to anyone. Why not? She paused. This was the honest part, the part she had been sitting with when he found her. Because 2 of the approvals that were bypassed were routed through the office of the infrastructure division head, Director Lim. He has been with Mirae for 15 years. I am a 2-year reviewer on the 14th floor. She looked at the desk. I was trying to work out whether anyone would listen to me. The room held that sentence. He leaned forward slightly. I'm listening to you, he said. They worked until 2 in the morning. Not together. She worked, and he sat in the chair and asked questions when she needed to think out loud, and occasionally stood at the filing cabinet when she needed to cross-reference a physical document and required a second pair of hands. He made himself useful in the specific way of a person who understands that the most helpful thing they can do in this moment is not lead but support. She found this surprising enough that at one point she stopped and looked at him. You're not what I expected, she said. It came out before she could stop it. He looked up from the document he was holding. What did you expect? Someone who would have called their legal team and left 40 minutes ago. Something shifted in his expression, not offense, something more interior than that. My legal team would have taken over the process, he said. And you would have become a source rather than the person who found it. There's a difference. She looked at him. Yes, she said. There is. She went back to the documents. He went back to the filing cabinet. At 2:15, she had everything she needed organized into a formal sequence. She had written, in her precise, clear hand, a one-page summary of findings, the kind of document that said exactly what it needed to say and nothing more. She pushed it across the desk to him. He read it. He read it again. This is very good, he said. Not the dismissive good of a superior reviewing a subordinate's work. The specific good of someone who recognizes quality. She felt something move in her chest that she identified, with mild alarm, as being seen. Thank you, she said carefully. I'll convene an internal review committee in the morning, he said. Independent of the infrastructure division. You will present this to the committee directly. You will be protected throughout this process, formally, with documentation. She looked at him. You believe me, she said. I told you I was listening. Listening isn't the same as believing. No, he agreed. But the documents are convincing. And you have no yellow sticky notes. The ghost of something in his expression, the very beginning of something that might, under other circumstances, become a smile. Go home, Ms. Eze. Get some sleep. This will be handled correctly. She began gathering her coat. You walked past a crying woman and knocked on her door, she said. At midnight. You didn't have to do that. He stood up. He buttoned his jacket with the automatic precision of a man with a habitual relationship with suits. You were trying not to be heard, he said. That's not the same as wanting to be alone. She stopped with her coat half on. She did not have an answer for that. She did not need one. The internal review was convened at 9 the following morning. Adaora was called to present her findings at 10:30, which gave her 90 minutes to go home, sleep for 4 hours, shower, change, and return to the building in the specific state of composed alertness that she had developed over years of being a person who did important things in rooms where no one expected her to be important. She presented for 40 minutes. She answered questions for another 20. She was precise, thorough, and completely unintimidated, which she attributed partly to preparation and partly to the fact that she had already been believed by the person whose belief mattered most. Director Lim was placed on administrative leave, pending the full review that afternoon. She went back to the 14th floor. She made tea. She sat at her desk, cleared now of the Q3 filing, which had been transferred upstairs, and felt, for the first time in 3 days, the particular lightness of a problem that has been correctly handed over. Her phone rang at 4:15. Ms. Eze. It's Shin Jae-won. She put down her tea. Chairman. The committee has confirmed your findings. The process failure extends further than the infrastructure division. We've identified 2 additional approval channels that require review. You will be formally credited in the audit report. A pause. I also want to ask you something that is not related to the audit. She waited. What made you come back to the documents a 3rd time? She considered this. Because the 2nd time I still had yellow notes, she said. And I don't submit anything with yellow notes. A beat. Is that how you work generally? Yes. On everything? On anything that matters. Another pause. The quality of it was different from his boardroom pauses. She had heard those from the business coverage, described as calculated. This one felt like something else. I'd like to continue this conversation, he said. Not about the audit. If you're willing. She looked at the cleared desk. At the space where the folders had been. In what capacity, she said. She asked this with complete directness, because she was a person who did not have yellow notes. In the capacity of 2 people who talked honestly for 3 hours last night and found it, he stopped. She heard him choosing the word. Worthwhile. She was quiet for a moment. Coffee, she said. Somewhere that is not this building. Tomorrow, he said. If that suits. It does, she said. She hung up. She picked up her tea. She looked out the 14th floor window at the Han River below, lower than his view, different angle, less commanding, but the same river. She thought, this is going to be complicated. She also thought, I have handled complicated things before. The cafe was in Mapo, the kind of neighborhood that belongs to artists and young professionals, and the specific soul demographic that values character over convenience. She had suggested it. He had agreed without asking where it was, which she noted. He arrived first, which surprised her. She had expected him to be the kind of man who arrived exactly on time as a form of precision, or slightly late as a form of power. He was there when she walked in, at a corner table with 2 coffees already ordered, reading something on his phone that he put away immediately when she sat down. "You knew what I'd want," she said, looking at the coffee. "Americano. You had it last night. You went to the machine in the corridor twice." She looked at him. "You noticed that." "I notice things." He said it without emphasis, as a simple fact. She picked up the coffee. She looked at him across the table, in a coat now, not the midnight suit, and the small shift in clothing made him look different. Less official. More present. "You want to know why I was crying," she said. "No," he said. "I know why you were crying. You'd been alone with a serious problem for 4 hours, and you weren't sure anyone would take you seriously when you raised it. That's a specific kind of lonely." He looked at her steadily. "I want to know who you are when you're not solving other people's problems." The cafe was warm around them. Morning light through the windows. The street outside moved with the easy pace of a neighborhood not in a hurry. She sat with the question. It was not a question she was often asked. "I grew up in Enugu," she said. "My mother is a teacher. My father was an engineer civil. He died when I was 19. I finished my degree in his honor and got my certification and came to Seoul because a placement agency told me Mirae was the best company in Asia for document systems work, and they were right." She paused. "I spend most of my free time in the Mapo library. I read everything. I cook badly, but enthusiastically. I have 2 friends in this city I trust completely and approximately 15 acquaintances. I take long walks along the Han at night when I need to think." She looked at him. "Now you." He was quiet for a moment, in the way of a man who has been asked to do something he doesn't often do. "Busan originally," he said. "My father built Mirae from a single shipping logistics firm. I joined at 26 and have not left. I am told I am difficult to know. Not because I am private, but because I ask more questions than I answer, which people experience as withholding." He paused. "I ask more questions because I find other people's answers more interesting than my own. I have not been able to explain this in a way that reads as anything other than evasiveness." She looked at him. "You explained it just fine," she said. He looked back at her. Something shifted in the contained quality, not breaking but opening, the way a window opens rather than a wall. "You take long walks along the Han at night," he said. "Yes. I run along the Han at 5 in the morning. I've done it for 10 years. I've never seen anyone on that stretch at 5 in the morning except the regular runners. I'm usually there between 10 and midnight." "Different hours," he said. "Same river." She felt something in that, not the poetry of it, though it had a poetry to it, but the precision. He had not said, "What a coincidence." He had said, "Same river," as though the continuity mattered. "Same river," she agreed. "Comment right now, are you feeling this? 2 people finding each other in the same city, the same river, different hours." Subscribe and share this before you go any further. This story earns everything in the next 30 minutes. The coffee became lunch. Neither of them mentioned that they had been there for 2 hours. She told him about her father. Not the death, which she had mentioned already, but the life. The way he had explained structural engineering to her on long car rides, using the specific pedagogy of a man who believes that if you understand why a bridge holds, you understand something true about the world. She had not become an engineer. Her mind ran toward systems rather than structures, toward the architecture of process rather than of things. But she had inherited his belief that precision is a form of love, that doing something correctly, completely, without yellow notes, is the most honest way of caring about it. He listened to this with the full weight attention she had first felt in the 14th floor office, and when she finished he said, "Your father sounds like a man who understood that thoroughness is a moral position." She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "Exactly that. I've never heard it said that way. I've been thinking about it since you said there were no yellow notes left." She looked at him. You've been thinking about it since last night? I've been thinking about several things since last night. The cafe held that sentence. The morning light had shifted to afternoon light. The street outside continued its easy pace. She did not ask what the several things were. She already knew. She was, as he had observed, a person who noticed things, but she understood that some things reveal themselves at their own speed, and that pressing produces armor rather than honesty. I should go back, she said. I have afternoon work. I have a 3 o'clock board call. He paused. I'd like to do this again. She looked at him. The direct, honest look she had been giving him since midnight in the office, which he had met each time without flinching. This is going to be complicated, she said. You know that. Yes. The company. The difference in our positions. People will. Yes, he said again. I know all of that. I'm asking anyway. She picked up her coat. Walk with me to the river next time, she said. I'll show you what it looks like between 10 and midnight. He stood. When, he said. Saturday, she said. If that suits. It does, he said. She left. She walked back toward the subway with her hands in her coat pockets, and the particular feeling of a person who has just agreed to something that is either very right or very complicated or both, and has decided that both is acceptable. Saturday came with the kind of soul weather that cannot decide between autumn and winter, cold enough for a proper coat, warm enough in the direct sun that you forgot it was November. She met him at the Mapo Bridge entrance at 10, which was later than she usually went but earlier than her deepest thinking hours, and she told him this. When do you think most clearly? He asked. 11:30, she said. When the path is completely empty and the city is quiet enough that I can hear the water. I think most clearly at 4:50 a.m., he said. Just before the run. When I'm awake but haven't started moving yet. Between stillness and motion, she said. Yes. That's an interesting time to think clearly. It's the only time the day hasn't started telling me what to think about, he said. She looked at him as they walked, the coat, the slightly different posture of a person not in a building, the quality of him outdoors that was subtly different from the quality of him inside. He seemed, she thought, slightly larger outside, as though the buildings had been containing something. The Han River at night was exactly what she had been describing it as, its own kind of answer. Wide and dark and lit along the edges by the bridge lights and the city's reflection, it moved with the specific slow certainty of something that has been exactly itself for a very long time and intends to continue. They walked for an hour before either of them said anything substantial. This was fine. She had learned, over 2 weeks of coffee and one long night in an office and a cafe lunch, and now this, that he was a person who existed comfortably in shared silence, not the silence of absence but the silence of presence. The silence of someone who is there, fully, without needing to fill the air. She had not met many people like that. She had not met anyone like that. At 11:15 they stopped at the railing above the water and stood looking at the river, and she said, Tell me something you don't tell people. He was quiet for a moment. I've been running this company for 12 years, he said. And I have not in 12 years been surprised by a person. Not in the way I mean. I have encountered unexpected competence, unexpected failure, unexpected loyalty, and its absence. Those are surprises of circumstance. I mean surprised by a person, by who someone is, in the way that makes you reconsider something you believed about yourself. She looked at the river. And she said, and then I took the wrong elevator on a Tuesday night. The river moved. The city lights held their reflections. You surprised me too, she said. You knocked. And then you stayed. And you didn't take over. I wanted to, he said. My instinct was to call the legal team and manage the process. Why didn't you? Because you had already been managing it for 4 hours alone, and you had done it better than the legal team would have. A pause. And, because I've been thinking about why else. I think it was the yellow notes. The fact that there weren't any. You had done every part of the work. What you needed was not management. It was witness. She turned to look at him. Witness, she said. Someone to confirm that what you had found was real. That it was serious. That it warranted the weight you had been giving it. He looked at the river. That's what I could do. So, I did it. She stood at the railing and thought about her father, who had said once that the best thing a person could offer another person was the full weight of their attention. Not advice, not solutions, not management. Just, I see what you're carrying, and it is real, and it matters. My father said something like that, she said. Not in those words. What were his words? She smiled, a real one, the kind that comes from somewhere deep rather than the surface. He said, the most important thing you can build is the ability to stand next to someone in what they're carrying without trying to take it from them. He looked at her when she said this. He looked at her for a long time. He was a remarkable man, he said. Yes, she said. He was. The river was wide and dark and moving, and the city glittered on both banks, and neither of them said anything for a while, and the silence had the quality that she had first felt in the 14th floor office. Not absence, but presence. Two people standing in the same space with the full weight of themselves. At 11:47, she said, Why did you really stay last night? The first night. Be honest. He was quiet for a beat, not evasively, but precisely. Finding the honest answer. Because I have walked past a great deal in 12 years, he said. Walked past things I noticed and chose not to address because they were not my floor. Not my problem. Not my department. He paused. I'm not proud of that. It is the specific failure mode of a person who has confused efficiency with goodness for a long time. He looked at the river. You were trying not to be heard. And I thought, here is one more thing I can walk past. And I didn't want to be the person who did. She looked at him. That's a very honest answer, she said. You said be honest. I did. She turned back to the river. I think you are better than you give yourself credit for. I think the version of you that knocked on that door was not an aberration. I think it was the part of you that has been there all along, waiting for a reason to come out. He was quiet. That is a generous reading, he said. I read documents for a living, she said. I have very good instincts about what a thing actually says versus what it appears to say. She glanced at him. You say more than you think you do. Something in his face moved, below the containment, below the precision, something warm and slightly undone. Adaora, he said. Her name, full, in his voice, for the first time. She had been Ms. Eze until now. Yes, she said. I want to tell you something. Tell me. The last 2 weeks have been the first 2 weeks in a long time where I have looked forward to a specific part of the day. Coffee. A phone call. This. He gestured at the river, at the night, at the space between them. I find myself wanting to know what you think about things. Not for professional reasons. Because your thinking is honest and precise, and I find it, he paused, necessary. In a way I did not expect and cannot entirely explain. She looked at him in the city light, this man who ran rivers at 5 in the morning and asked more questions than he answered, and had confused efficiency with goodness for a long time, and had, on a Tuesday night, chosen not to walk past. J1, she said. His name, no title. He looked at her. I also have no yellow notes, she said. He understood what that meant. She saw it land in him, the full weight of it, the precision of it, the way she had chosen to say it. He moved first. One step. The gap between them, one coat's width, now closed. He raised his hand and touched her face the way you touch something you have been careful about for 2 weeks, with the full, unhurried certainty of a person who has arrived somewhere after a long, deliberate journey. She leaned into it. The river was wide behind them. The city glittered on both banks. The bridge lights held their long reflections in the dark water, and Seoul moved around them with the enormous, indifferent, beautiful energy of a city that does not stop. Inside it, at the railing, two people who had found each other by accident on a wrong floor at midnight were not an accident anymore. They were a decision, made clearly, completely, without yellow notes. The morning after, she arrived at the 14th floor at 8:30 to find a single item on her desk, a fresh cup of Americano in a paper cup from the cafe in Mapo, still warm, with a note in precise handwriting that said only, Same river. J. She sat down. She wrapped both hands around the cup. She thought about her father, who had taught her that precision is a form of love. She thought about a man who had knocked on an open door instead of walking past. She thought about the river at midnight, wide and dark and exactly itself, and a question she had asked honestly, and an answer she had received the same way, and no yellow notes anywhere between them. She picked up her pen. She turned the note over. She wrote, "Same river. Always. A." She folded it. She sent it upstairs with the morning courier. She began her work. Outside, Seoul was doing what Seoul always does, moving, building, arriving at itself one decision at a time. She was doing the same. That is the story. He refused to leave, not because of what he saw, because of who she was. And in staying, he found something he had been walking past for 12 years. If this reached you, share it right now. Subscribe if you haven't already. And leave me one comment. What was the moment that got you? I'll be reading every single one.
See you at the next story.